Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. In Jean Renoir's great 1937 film La Grande Illusion, set during World War I, Elsa, played by Dita Parlo, a German farmer's wife, shelters in her mountain home two escaped French prisoners of war, Lieutenant Maréchal and Rosenthal, Jean Gabin and Marcel Dalliot. Her husband and brothers are all dead, killed recently in fighting at our greatest victories, as she remarks bitterly, leaving only her and her little daughter. Renoir helps us to understand her loneliness by having her point to the great big farmhouse table around which the menfolk used to sit. The table, now almost empty and with chairs upturned on it, symbolises the overwhelming absence and loss caused by this war between France and Germany. And she turns quietly away. Scenes like these in films reveal very vividly, I think, the peculiar, quiet reticence of furniture in our everyday lives. In English, we have an expression, to be part of the furniture, when someone is taken for granted and goes unnoticed. On a film set, however, lifted from its daily roles of menial service, the furniture is illuminated in a scripted limelight, and we notice its symbolic and social meanings afresh. Viewed as supporting actors in the drama, we can look at them in their own terms, not as the silent servants of our everyday lives, but as objects designed to stand and be admired and function, miniature architecture, if you like. For over 150 years, the V&A in London has been collecting furniture and displaying it alongside the other decorative arts in its major galleries. But until recently, it never had a gallery focused solely on furniture and how furniture was made. Moreover, the Dr. Susan Weber Gallery is the only dedicated gallery in the world to show a comprehensive display of Western furniture from the Middle Ages to the present day. Like the V&A itself, the new gallery is intended to be a resource for designers and makers, conservators and restorers, students and collectors. But it's also for anyone with a curiosity about furniture or who likes to understand how things are made. In our sponsor, Dr. Susan Weber, founder and director of the Bard Graduate Centre in New York, we were fortunate to have a furniture scholar and enthusiast whose happy relationship with the V&A goes back many years, indeed before the year 2000, when our project to create the gallery began. So, what's wrong with showing furniture, as we've always done, alongside other types of decorative arts? Well, nothing, of course, there's nothing wrong with it. And we continue to do that. The V&A, as regular visitors know, has two types of gallery. Cultural galleries, such as the British galleries, the Medieval and Renaissance, or the Nehru Gallery of Indian Art, or, for example, the new Continental 1600 to 1800 galleries, which open in a couple of months' time. And these galleries show many types of object from a single culture or period. And secondly, we have what we call materials and techniques galleries, silver, miniatures, ceramics, where you'll see one type of object with examples drawn from many cultures and periods. The new furniture gallery is in this second category, a materials and techniques gallery. The American marketeur, Silas Koff, expressed it very neatly, I think, when he wrote, "Fantastic objects in museums are passed by every day because people don't have an insider's perspective." And the driving principle of the new furniture gallery is that understanding how furniture is made provides an insider's perspective and transforms the understanding of furniture design. The 200 pieces in the gallery have been chosen not because of their style or because of the famous names of their designers, but because they embody a particular technique. Along the recessed sides of the gallery are 16 technique displays, constituting the bulk of the objects on display. These address techniques by which furniture is constructed, such as joinery and cabinet making, to take a most obvious example, but also by bending solid materials or casting liquid ones, cutting sheet material, or digital manufacture. It also represents those techniques by which furniture is decorated, such as marquetry, gilding and lacquer, and techniques that can be used to construct as well as to decorate, such as carving or turning. And lastly, a display on the development of upholstery and its alternatives on chairs. To help explain clearly how each technique is carried out, in front of each display a range of interpretive devices offers insights into the techniques used. Here, a series of replicas shows the creation, stage by stage, of 18th century pictorial marquetry in its original brilliant colours, as on this rather Germanic Bombay commode, probably made in England by Henry Hill of Marlborough in about 1760. The skin of pictorial marquetry is cut and assembled like a jigsaw, the natural grain and colours of the different woods enhanced by various methods, such as shading using hot sand or staining with colours, though those colours rarely lasted. In contrast, a short film shows how the single-piece Panton cantilevered plastic chair, designed in 1960, is today made in injection-moulded fiberglass reinforced polypropylene. Originally, polyurethane foam was cast in a mould, then polished, primed and painted, but later, in the search for the perfect mix of flexibility, durability and lightness, other plastics were used. The photograph here, which is one of my favourites, shows the wife of the designer, Marianne Panton, and wife of the manufacturer, Christina Fehlbaum, demonstrating the sturdiness of the chairs. Boule work is one of those marquetry techniques that most people have heard of, but often struggle to recall precisely. This cabinet, top left, was made in about 1700, probably by André Charles Boule's workshop itself, but it was restored around 1770 by Etienne Levasseur and altered about 10 years later by Adam Weisweiler. We know because of the stamps that remain. In the gallery, next to the cabinet itself, is a short film showing the making of a motif in Boule marquetry, copied from the front. And in front of the film, you can see the samples themselves. The insider's perspective is necessary to understand much luxury furniture because the surface decoration deliberately conceals structure. Most furniture, after all, does not conform to arts and crafts style principles of revealed construction. In the joinery display, one of the star pieces is this French commode made in Paris around 1770 by the ebonist Mathieu Guillaume Crémer. The plain oak carcass was probably made by Vogel van der Cruz, but of course has not been seen since the 1770s. And so we commissioned a half replica to reveal the frame and panel construction, dovetails, mortise and tenon joints and so on. Without the marquetry, without the gilt brass mounts and the marble top, we can understand the joinery and how the structure supports both the marquetry skin and the great weight of the marble slab. To make it even clearer, we stretch the joints apart to show how they fit together. From the back, here, we can see three floating panels. Frame and panel construction is lightweight and strong and allows large panels to expand and contract without splitting as changes in humidity occur. And here, under the marble slab, we can see Crémer's stamp and the authorising stamp of the Gironde des Menuisiers Ébénistes, the Paris Guild of Cabinet Makers. While many of the techniques of Western furniture that the gallery represents are ancient in origin, the gallery also addresses some of the latest developments in manufacturing, such as 3D printing. The Fractal Table, inspired by the form of a dragon tree, was designed by Platform, made in England by the Belgian company MGX by Materialise from Leuven, using a type of additive manufacturing called stereolithography. This contemporary alchemy transforms base material, in this case resin, into a design inspired by fractal growth patterns found in nature. I think it's astounding to consider that this table could not have been made in any other way. A short film in the gallery shows how epoxy resin was spread on the base of a sealed tank. When struck by a UV laser, the designated areas hardened to create one horizontal layer of the table. Over 7 to 10 days, hundreds of horizontal layers were added, causing the table legs to grow organically until the finished structure is raised from its resin bath like a creature rising from a primordial swamp. And then the resin is cured and dyed to the finished colour. And I'd just like to show you an extract from the film. All the gallery films are available on the V&A website, by the way, so you can see the full version later on. Furniture restorers know that the ideal way to study furniture is raised up on a bench in a well-lit studio so that you can see the back, inside and understand. And with that in mind, the central spine of the gallery displays 25 key pieces introducing the principal forms of Western furniture, from a medieval chest to Ron Arrad's fluid bookworm bookshelf made of batch-dyed thermoplastic technopolymer, or Charles and Ray Eames' versatile storage unit of 1949. Since the gallery has doors at both ends, this parade of 25 pieces can be read as an evolution or, looking backwards, as an archaeological exploration, uncovering the layers of ancestor furniture cultures. These pieces are shown in a round so that their backs are deliberately and sometimes shockingly exposed, revealing, for example, the roughly nailed backboards on an Irish bureau of about 1730, said to have belonged to the satirist Jonathan Swift. This piece here. That's a metal support just to prevent it tipping backwards, by the way. Or another example, the superb joinery on Edwin Lutyens' stupendous cabinet made in about 1905 for the country house he designed, Marsh Court in Hampshire. The high plinths used in the gallery, closer to bench height than to floor level, also encourage a glimpse of the steel armature that Lutyens concealed within the stand to support the great weight, 250 kilograms if you're interested, of a fireproof safe. It's a telling example of the interrelatedness of function, design and construction in furniture. Incidentally, despite his sturdily protected safe, Johnson's fortune, the client, said to be worth £500,000 by 1900, was diminished in the Great Depression, and he was forced to sell the house for £60,000 in 1932. Ironically, perhaps, the fireproof safe was no protection against the volatility of the stock market. The 200 pieces of Western furniture on display in the gallery are strikingly diverse, formally, geographically and historically, from an Italian 16th century Scabello chair to Breuer's Bauhaus tubular steel armchair. From a gilded Rococo mirror with papier-mâché branches to an inflatable plastic chair. Occasionally, an Asian or pre-medieval piece offers a different perspective on familiar Western techniques by showing, for example, Urushi lacquer, Islamic intarsia, or ancient Egyptian woodwork, as here with this New Kingdom acacia wood chair leg from about 1200 BC. And on the right, the image shows a chair in the Louvre of the same type as the chair ripped from its structure by tomb robbers. Two of the most striking aspects of furniture revealed by this approach are its diversity in appearance and materials, and the continuity in basic techniques over very long periods, albeit with ingenious refinements. Unexpected and revealing juxtapositions are frequent. A 19th century English Windsor chair of about 1830 beside Hans Luckhart's cantilevered tubular steel chair, both of them made by taking solid materials and bending them. Or this Commode by BVRB of about 1760, alongside Eileen Gray's Art Deco screen of about 1928, both made using urushi lacquer, the one imported and applied by French craftsmen to the Commode, the other made in Gray's Paris studio. In fact, Eileen Gray was one of the very first Westerners to learn the technique and studied under Seizo Sugawara, a Japanese lacquer master living in Paris. Another telling juxtaposition is this one of a North Italian chest, probably the last 20 years of the 15th century, alongside an Indo-Portuguese table of the 17th century, both made with geometric inlay of the type found also on ancient Egyptian furniture. And where else might you see a John Linnell 18th century chair with latticed plywood back alongside an IKEA chipboard bookcase? The juxtaposition, shocking to some, makes sense here, I think, because both pieces are constructed using different types of engineered board. Sometimes the combinations on show suggest surprising and complex design continuity across wide distances of time and space. At one end of the chronological spine is an Augsburg Marquetry cabinet, the last 20 years of the 16th century, I think. And at the other end, Eugene Berman's surrealist wardrobe in 1939. Now, in strict historical terms, they have very little in common. And then we notice that both of them are covered in depictions of architectural ruins. What was particularly exciting in juxtaposing very different pieces in this way was seeing how some deeper themes emerge. One of these is the cross-cultural exchange in furniture making, which emerges particularly strongly in the display on lacquer and japanning. This hall chair was made in about 1725. Chairs like this were arranged around the walls of the entrance hall in a grand English house, so the backs were not usually seen. The hardwood seat and backboards, these two pieces, made in China, Canton, were lacquered, a technique not carried out in the West at that time, partly because the vital ingredient, a tree sap, known as urushi in Japan and chai in China, deteriorated beyond use during the sea voyage to Europe, and also because the technique was such a complicated one. Each lacquer layer has to be meticulously hardened in a controlled high humidity atmosphere and polished. It's slowly built up on a prepared substrate in many thin layers, giving a finish that's hard, waterproof and lustrous. Here, in the gallery, you can follow this incredibly complex and time-consuming process where samples commissioned by a living national treasure in Japan demonstrate the 28-step process in creating the basic lacquer ground, and that's 28 stages even before decoration is added, such as carving, inlay or gold dust sprinkled between the layers. In East Asia, lacquer has been applied to furniture for over 3,000 years. Export to the West was established only by about 1600. These are the 28 layers, just to build up the basic substrate. For this chair, the back and seat boards were lacquered with British heraldry, added by special order by the Chinese craftsmen, and then flat packed and shipped to Britain, where they were assembled on the English-made legs, which were japanned black to match. The construction of the chair posed a particular challenge because the panels are separate from the frame, and the point where they meet, down here, notoriously weak. The solution was to have the back legs rising above the seat and supporting the back in an elongated scarf joint, as it's known in English, and to have the two panels meet in a strong dovetail, fixed to the frame with 4 long screws, so they weren't taking any chances. The chair neatly encapsulates, I think, a number of key themes addressed by the new gallery. The appearance in the West of new techniques and their simulation using other materials, the copying of forms, exchange of design ideas, and the solving of structural problems. Since so much furniture before 1800 cannot be attributed to a named designer, never mind a named maker, we felt it was important to offset this sense of anonymity by exploring the personal furniture careers of 8 individual designers and makers in a series of mini displays. These range from famous names such as Thomas Chippendale, Michael Tonnet or Frank Lloyd Wright to the Irish designer Eileen Gray and the lesser known George Brookshaw, an Englishman who specialised in about 1800 in innovative painted furniture and fittings. These mini displays offer a different personified perspective on the history of furniture by considering the complementary skills of those involved in the design, making and marketing of furniture. In short audio recordings you can also find on the website, curators and contemporary designers or makers offer their personal responses to the furniture. On the island of Orkney, far to the north of Scotland, straw-back chairs, like this one, were a traditional type made using driftwood washed up on the beaches because there was no trees on Orkney. Now, during the arts and crafts period, thousands of them were made and exported all over the world from the workshop of David Kirkness. And in the clip I'm about to play you, a contemporary chairmaker on Orkney, a young man called Fraser Anderson, who came to London to record his piece for us, and who makes the same type of chairs today, describes the island context of the hooded chairs and the labour involved in weaving local straw for the chair backs. I hope you can follow his accent. It's a lovely, soft, lilting one.
Well, in Orkney, being in the north of Scotland, it's very exposed. There's only one parish in Orkney you can't see the sea from, so there's no trees, so you can imagine it's very windy. An Orkney chair is passed from generation to generation, and traditionally, some people said the drawer was for the Bible, some said it was for the bottle of whiskey, and some both. When I first started, it was very hard on the hands. It used to be wrapped up in tape and things. A lot of people say to wear a glove, but you can't get the right feel for the back if you wear a glove. So it just means that you have hands like leather.
Hands like leather, and when you shake his hand, you realise that. At the centre of the furniture gallery are 3 specially commissioned and unconventional pieces of furniture. 2 digital tables present clustered samples of materials used in furniture manufacture, various hardwoods and softwoods, metals, plastic and organic materials such as cane, rush or turtle shell. When you touch a sample and keep your hand on it, the tabletop screen shows the sourcing and conversion of the material, its properties for furniture making and key examples in the galleries. The other unconventional piece at the centre of the gallery is a seating installation that you're invited to sit down on, made by contemporary designer Gita Geschwentner, a German living in London, as so many furniture makers have been. Using pale ash wood, she copied 6 gallery chairs made using different techniques and types of wood, from Frank Lloyd Wright's Ward Willis house chair to an 18th century English walnut dining chair here. She then mixed and matched the backs to create a work that combines aspects of a park bench, a parlour game and a design handbook with wit and elegance. Like the gallery, it draws together very different furniture designs and invites a second look at their construction and decoration. I think, like all good furniture, it considers both body and mind. Some of the furniture in the gallery, particularly after walking around the fair this afternoon, might seem surprisingly modest. A simple oak stool made in England when Shakespeare was alive, almost pure joinery, consists of little more than 16 mortise and tenon joints, but it's still perfectly usable. And interestingly, a note pasted underneath records that this and its pair were old coffin stools from Essex. These stools used to be kept as part of the furniture and used in case of a death in the house. So they were placed together and the coffin stood on it while people were paying their respects to the body. Another surprisingly modest piece is this charming washstand of about 1790, possibly painted by its owner. Here the paint was applied directly onto the wood without a priming layer using oil-based paints. and a layer of spirit varnish protected the decoration against water splashes. Cracks in the paint, as you can see, these cracks have occurred over time as the wood expanded and contracted in changing humidity. We deliberately didn't restore the paintwork so that visitors can appreciate what 200-year-old paint might look like. And Thomas Sheraton's book, The Cabinet Maker and Upholsterer's Drawing Book, 1792, shows a similar washdown and explains that by the top folding down, the basin is enclosed and hid when not in use. Very useful for your bachelor apartment while you're entertaining. But as you'd expect at the V&A, other pieces in the gallery are familiar textbook masterpieces. One of these, which we show in the display on carving, is the huge mahogany cupboard supplied to the 6th Earl of Coventry for Croom Court, Worcestershire, based on a 1764 design by Robert Adam that I show on the right. It features wonderful applied carving by a named carver, Sephirin Alkin. But in fact, things are not quite what they seem. What we're looking at today, as you can tell by comparing it with the original design, is not the original cupboard as designed by Adam and constructed by John Cobb. I wonder whether Mrs. Coventry's maids got fed up climbing for 10 minutes to reach the top drawers because it's so enormous. But for whatever reason, it was returned to Cobb's workshop in 1767, shortly after its construction, and converted into two, presumably more convenient, smaller pieces. Now, one of the gallery themes that emerges vividly in this example and many others is the way that furniture changes over time, physically as well as in use and context. The likelihood that furniture has been repaired, improved, or otherwise modified during its lifetime is so familiar to owners as to be unremarkable, and yet I think museums have struggled to convey this complexity. Rare, pristine pieces of furniture are, of course, fundamentally important to the study of the subject, but we omit half the story if we disparage and hide furniture that's been modified. One of my favourite pieces in the gallery is this strongbox made in about 1680, possibly in London or in the Netherlands. Very similar products were made in both centres. There are secret drawers for extra security. Here you can see some of the drawers that would normally be concealed. And for extra security, two long iron bolts are fitted into the sides and can be screwed down into the floorboards using a T-bar, immobilising the box overnight. Some of the brass mounts are used for security, but most of them for effect. The stout carcass, made of oak, is richly veneered with a tropical hardwood, probably rosewood. But on close inspection, again, all is not quite what it seems. This is a little oak drawer. At first glimpse, it seems to have been veneered with rosewood in just the same way, but in fact it's been cleverly grained or painted to look like the luxury imported timber. I wonder if the first owner spotted a shortcut. By revealing aspects normally hidden, or drawing attention to the many methods and shortcuts by which makers simulated more expensive finishes, the gallery emphasises both the frugality and ingenuity that characterises so much European furniture. Yes, it has to look good, and often it has to fit into a fashionable interior, but the piece had to be competitively priced, and it had to keep working day after day. In recent years, it's become clear that many modern wonder materials, like plastic or foam, that seemed indestructible, may actually have a very short lifespan as their chemical structures deteriorate, and no easy way to arrest the process. 1960s furniture may literally be crumbling before our eyes. We wanted to show how Olivier Morgue's gin chair of 1963, the one you might recognise from Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, was constructed. But of course we couldn't cut our chair to pieces without ruining it. Here X-rays revealed what lies underneath the red jersey cover, the structure of tubular steel frame and webbing riveted onto itself to support a layer of polyurethane foam, an aerated synthetic developed for seating in the 1950s as a cheaper and easier method than traditional stuffing or springs. I'm very glad to say that for now at least the foam is intact. We took another approach for this superb 1730 upholstered chair made for Houghton Hall in Norfolk, which represents the very best in London chair making of its day. we made an almost complete copy. The replica upholstery was finished and then sliced open. So spare a thought for the upholsterer taking his very sharp knife to that fabulous silk velvet, revealing the structure underneath of webbing, base cloth and horsehair stuffing. The replica also gave us an opportunity to reinstate the silk scarf, as it was known, originally fitted to the chair. This was a kind of antimacassar that could be flipped over the front of the chair to protect the expensive velvet from the sitter's hair powder. Now, in closing, I'd like to return to Jean Renoir's La Grande Illusion. In the middle of the film, the French prisoners of war are enthusiastically digging an escape tunnel, fearful that their German guards are about to make a surprise check. The Frenchmen try to jam the door by tucking under the handle a lightweight chair. In fact, the danger turns out to be not the German guards, but lack of oxygen in the tunnel, as Rosenthal almost suffocates. It's a type of chair we're all familiar with, the classic tonnet-style chair, made of steam-bent, solid and laminated beechwood, versions of which were made in vast numbers. By the year 1912, 1.8 million chairs every year. In 1855, Michael Tonnet made a key technological breakthrough. After years of bending laminated wood, he discovered that by attaching a metal strip along its length, solid wood could be bent in the same way. This eliminated the costly lamination process and earned patents guaranteeing a virtual monopoly on production. The Tonnets were now ready for mass production, and in 1857 they built a new factory in Koritzstan in the Moravian forests, what was then Austro-Hungary, with a ready supply of beechwood, plenty of cheap labour and access to important rail links. The firm's key design principle was to manufacture on production lines as many chair models as possible from as few different parts as possible, and the company's catalogues demonstrate just how successful they were. Steaming and bending were completed by men and the less arduous sanding and finishing by women. For ease of shipping, the parts were packed in 1 metre crates containing 36 chairs to be assembled on arrival in shops or showrooms. And in the gallery, as you see to the right, we actually show the dismantled parts of a number 14 chair. No 19th century firm sold as many chairs to as many countries, including Africa, Asia and the Americas, or had as many branch offices as Tonnet. By 1930, over 50 million modelled number 14 chairs alone had been sold. Jean Renoir couldn't, I think, have chosen a better universal chair for this little scene, the sort of chair on which both German and French soldiers might have sat in a cafe to share a drink, now pressed into service to keep them apart by locking the door of their prison cell. But what a splendid cameo role for our best supporting actor. Thank you.
There was a chair by the artist, a white chair with many different...
Yes, Gita Geschwentner's chair bench, she calls it.
Yes, and I noticed the sketch is a bit different.
Yes, that was her first idea when we invited a number of designers to submit ideas. What we said was we had one space in the middle of the gallery and we wanted somewhere that visitors could sit down, but something that also prompted visitors to think about the subject of the gallery, about techniques of construction and decoration. And so this was an idea that she floated with us, and then we sat down together to choose the individual chairs and to refine the piece to fit the space more precisely.
That second question is, are there many spaces like this where visitors are allowed to actually sit on some of the...
Yes, being able to sit comfortably in a gallery is one of our first considerations, because we know from our own experience that when you're tired walking around the museum thinking, have I seen this, this and this yet, and where can I get a cup of coffee? I just want to sit down for 5 minutes. So seating is very important. In fact, we have 3 kinds of seating in the gallery. This piece, but we also have upholstered benches within that central spine that I mentioned for visitors to sit on there. And throughout the museum we have little portable folding stools that you can take with you and use wherever you like. They get lots of use.
Thank you. How is it, because it's quite amazing how you mix a masterpiece of classical furniture with almost contemporary design. Is it difficult for the public to browse from very classical to contemporary design?
They seem to have no difficulty at all. We did some research a few months after the gallery opened to understand not only how many visitors were coming into the space, and I should say that the gallery is right at the top corner of the building. It's not a space that you walk into the first time you arrive in the museum. I think of it as a more grown-up gallery that people will find their way to, perhaps on a second or a third visit to the museum. So we wanted to understand who was coming to the gallery, how long they were spending, particularly if they were finding the digital labels that we use in the gallery. That's the first time we've introduced that presentation in the museum. So we wanted to understand how people were using the gallery. And those that we interviewed and observed seemed to have no difficulty in grasping what the gallery is about. It's a very simple idea, really. How is the furniture made? And they seem to take very naturally to seeing these juxtapositions that might seem to scholars a bit shocking at first sight.
The Italian chair, when
Yes.
you were saying that it's laminated, they used to have laminated, and then after they use solid wood that they can bend. What do you mean when you say laminated?
So lamination is where you have layers glued together. In lamination, the grain of each layer runs in the same direction, whereas in plywood, the grain of each layer is placed at 90 degrees, making for a stronger process. But in a sense, plywood is also a kind of lamination, glued layers.
Thank you.
That's a pleasure.